Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the AP reported last week that CEOs from American, United, Southwest, I guess Alaska, and JetBlue all met in the White House. I guess met online with the White House because we're still doing the Zoom things. Yet they didn't want to do testing for people getting on the planes, which was kind of weird to me. Going, okay, you're going to do Zoom calls because you don't want to spread the virus, but yet. Everybody cram onto the plane, and we don't care who's got what. And it made me think, I get the airline industry struggling and having a hard time, but you know what's going to make the airline industry struggle a lot more? If the virus explodes again and we end up having another shutdown. I think that would be just a little bit worse. And here to share some thoughts on, well, is this a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Should we be testing people before they get on the plane? Should we be making them wear masks? Should we be doing all of that other stuff? That's why I've asked Sara Nelson to come talk with us. Sara is the president of the Flight Attendants Union, AFA-CWA. Sara, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. I'm happy to be here.
So
always.
Well, let's start with you first. I understand you're just on the mend from having contracted COVID. In fact, your whole family, right?
That's right. Whole family down for the count through all of January. Just after the insurrection, we tested positive. And I should be clear, we were not at the insurrection, but it just so happened to coincide. And it was not fun. And I got a little lingering cough from it. Hopefully no long-term effects, but I don't want anyone to have to go through this.
And hopefully no boomerang effects, because one of the things that I've had people tell me is that, yeah, you might get through it here, but in a couple of weeks, couple of months down the road, it may boomerang back, which would be a bad thing.
Yes, that would be a bad thing. So we got to eradicate the virus. We've been saying this from the beginning. AFA, the Association of Flight Attendants, has been saying this from the beginning. We just came through a very strange 4 years, Rick. I'm not sure if you were aware of that or not, but it was a very, very strange 4 years. And, we in transportation, we have been on the front lines of stopping the spread of communicable disease for as long as I can remember, my whole career. And actually, we've made gains while I've been a flight attendant and a union member and activist on getting tools to flight attendants so that we are best fitted to be able to stop the spread. So we get proper PPE in our workplace. We got OSHA protections on board and training to stop the spread of bloodborne pathogens. And because of this, because of what we fought for on the front end, we got that training about 10 years ago. And we were probably the best armed out of anyone in the United States to be able to face it. Remember, we started facing COVID a year ago, more than a year ago. Flights started canceling in January last year. So we've been on the front lines, and we've been saying that the problem is the virus. You got to eradicate the virus. I've never seen an administration not only not engage on a plan to do that, because typically the United States would not only have a plan here in the United States to deal with this, but would actually recognize that we actually need to get resources to the hot spots, to the place where this is forming and spreading, so that we can stop it at its source. And so, President Trump calling this a hoax, former President Trump calling this a hoax, and telling people that wearing masks was unnecessary and a political thing, and shutting down was just shutting down our economy. Everybody should just get back to work. Meat cutters should go packed back into meat plants and, cut the meat that we want. And, everything's fair game. That's what we've been dealing with. And flight attendants know almost better than anyone, because our workplace is actually everywhere, all of the United States. We know almost better than anybody intimately what the difference was in each of these geographic regions, about the kind of leadership that there was there and how people were responding to that. So flights out of New York, everybody was wearing masks right away. Everybody was doing it. We didn't have to ask anybody to do it. You go down to Florida and it was what I would say the wild, wild west, even though we were in the deep Southeast. But that was a problem. And so having just isolated actions are like dropping a drop of penicillin into the ocean. It doesn't do anything at all. And we need to have a coordinated government response. So you were asking about this concept of having people have to test.
Correct.
And get a negative test before they get on a domestic flight, which frankly, we've been talking about actually for the past year. And as we know, there are not enough tests to go around. People have had a hard time getting tests. This has been a major issue. This has been an issue for safety in our schools and everything else. And it just so happens that today with the people that are traveling, and there are essential reasons to travel. People have medical reasons to travel. People have reasons to travel for family emergencies. So while maybe it's not a good idea to be hopping on the plane and going for a beach trip right now, there is still a reason to travel. And certainly we've brought goods and services to communities that need them. Half the U.S. mail flies in the belly of our aircraft. Medical professionals have been brought on our aircraft to be able to treat the virus and treat people who are in need. So there is a need for it. You can't just shut down that travel. But you do need to have actions that actually will be effective. So if you had everyone who is traveling today have to take a test before you get on the plane, we're talking about a 3-day test. It's to the user who has to go out and do that. They're still going to get on mass transportation in the meantime, and there's going to be people on that mass transportation that hasn't been tested. There's going to be getting rental cars and everything else. But even if you do that, it would take half the tests in the United States to cover the people who are traveling today. So the reason that our union was against that right now, putting that in place right now, without making sure that it is something that is going to be implemented in a way that's going to work, is that it is going to be a cosmetic ad because it would take away from other need. It wouldn't actually stop the virus because you have other forms of transportation too. And it's a really good example of why we've been saying from the beginning, you've got to have a task force that has unions at the table, that has other stakeholders at the table, that is interagency. Because as we saw, we were involved in that kind of thing during the Ebola crisis, and it worked very well. CDC had recommendations that wouldn't work in our workplace. They told us things like, well, if you come across these symptoms on the plane and someone has Ebola, then just move them 6 feet away from everyone else. We're like, yeah, not possible in our workspace. So thank you so much for that recommendation, but let's talk about things that are actually going to work. So really what this is that if you could actually have testing at the airport that would be seamless, that people could come to the airport and be at the airport door, be tested. We've been testifying to this actually in Congress for over a year. That would be a great solution, right?
Absolutely.
But that's not the kind of infrastructure that we have in place. And so it would take away from other need and not really stop the spread of the virus in air travel.
And the question that I have is, why don't we have this? Other countries have rapid tests, don't they? I mean, you can pull up. I mean, I can go not too far from here and spend $150 and have my results in 15 minutes. I don't understand why we haven't used the Defense Production Act to ramp up those tests to make sure that they're everywhere before you get on a plane. 100%. Before your kids go to school, that we're testing people early and often, because that's how we're going to stop it spreading.
That's right. So here's what you have to do in any crisis like this. I mean, this has gone on for a year now. And not only have we had no government action plan, no coordinated plan, but we actually had a president saying that it was a hoax and fighting against us and putting us in more danger on the plane, because we had people coming to the airplane door thinking that wearing a mask was a political choice rather than a public health necessity. So now here we are trying to pick up the pieces, but there's an added layer. We have a vaccine now. We have several vaccines now. We're hoping to get beyond this pandemic. So what we're saying now to the Biden administration is, yes, we're definitely for testing before people get on flights, but we've got to make sure that we can make it work. So get that Defense Production Act moving, get enough tests in place, have the infrastructure in place to do this properly, and not to push that then to the traveler. I mean, I think about the travelers that we've had on our planes, like grandmothers who are actually putting themselves more at risk by coming out, but they're going to go help their kids because one of the parents has contracted COVID and they're in the hospital, and the other parent now is having to try to work, pull everything together, and because they've got the grandparent coming to help them. These are the people who are getting on our planes, right? And so So we've got to put our resources into the things that are going to help right now, and parachuting in with an administration that knows how to do this. Joe Biden and the people around him know how to do this. You've got to start acting on the things that are going to make the biggest difference first. So that's why you've seen such a focus from Joe Biden on getting the Defense Production Act moving, but also on getting people vaccinated, because we've got that now. We've got to be methodical about that now. I want to be working with the Biden administration about getting this into our workplace and having clinics at the airports. I had a conversation with Secretary Buttigieg about this the other night. Airports are also often a place where right around the airport, you have low-income housing. And so they could be a central place where people who otherwise don't have access to the vaccine can come. And putting it into the workplace for the other people who are going in and out of the airport for their work also increases the likelihood that people are actually going to do it. Because people are opposed to taking the vaccine for a couple reasons right now. A few legitimate, okay, but for the vast majority of people, it's an inconvenience and they're just not sure. And so putting this in the workplace, just like you do with the flu shot, that increases the likelihood of people saying, oh, my friends are doing it, I'll do it too. So it's effective on many levels. And if you're doing it at work, you also can keep track of those second doses. So you're increasing the efficacy of the vaccine as well. We need to be focusing on the things that are eradicating the pandemic. And so the only reason that we were standing with the airline CEOs on this one at this time is because this would have wasted a lot of time and resources with the government and not put forward a plan that could actually be effective right now. Doesn't mean we're always against it. But it wasn't the right thing to be focusing on right now because we didn't have the means to make it successful.
Again, we just don't have the tests yet. And again, this is a failure of the previous administration to not do what we needed to have done months ago. So I'm not surprised by it. But here's my problem. Why aren't we seeing, mass vaccinations? I mean, I'm told we bought a couple 100 million. They're ramping up production. Why aren't we seeing everyone holding a needle, jabbing somebody with it? Every one of our public transit people, whether it's, airline workers or it's, the guy who drives the bus or runs the rapid trains, they should be getting these vaccines and soon. And yet I'm seeing a lot of my friends in transportation who they're still waiting. Why haven't we gotten bus drivers and transit workers vaccinated yet? It's insane.
Well, this is going to shock you, Rick, but Trump lied.
Of course.
So that's really why we didn't have enough vaccine orders in place to be able to conduct this mass vaccination. So in a lot of places, the vaccine is just not there to perform this. And so we're going to see that ramping up. That's also what the Biden administration has been working on. And by late March and April, this is going to be much more available. And so what we're saying now is, okay, great. We're going to have access to enough doses to be able to actually conduct all these vaccinations. In the meantime, let's put a plan in place and a structure in place so that it's in the work sites and we're ready to do that. And we're ready to provide this to people so that they're not having to go out and try to do that on their own. It's available to them. It's readily available to them, and all workers have access to it.
I'll tell you, I feel a lot better that you're on the job here and pushing the right people in the right direction. I feel a lot better. I do want to ask you a couple of quick questions on, something I think the Biden administration has to move on quickly. They have a very short period of time to get this rescue package pushed through. They need to get money into the state and local governments. But we also need to be pushing infrastructure. We need to be pushing workers' rights. And for me, the PRO Act is front and center. I can't go another Democratic administration, another one in my lifetime that's promised me we're going to get major labor law reform, and we get nothing. Tell me where you think we are with Biden pushing the PRO Act.
Well, I mean, I think, listen, we have the most pro-labor rhetoric president that we have had in 100 years. That's a really good place to start. It's a really good place to start that on day one, Joe Biden rolled back the anti-labor provisions that Trump had put in place. A lot of people will say getting back to, even is no good, but we have to be really clear. Every step forward makes the next step possible. So, for example, for federal workers who had had their union structures essentially dismantled because Trump's shut down all of the union offices in the workplace, made it impossible for the union representatives to get time off work to do their union work. So essentially there was like zero union structure there in the federal workplace. And now Joe Biden has restored that. Now, he restored that on paper, but getting into these agencies, getting the secretaries confirmed, the deputies, getting all the other people in place are really critical, because you don't necessarily have people who are rushing to make sure that they are reversing all that harmful work that Trump had done. So it's going to take a little bit of time. And I think that we have to be realistic about that. But putting that back in place at the federal level, setting that standard for workers everywhere and for employers everywhere is really important. I will tell you that corporate America is getting the message that Joe Biden is the union guy. You know, a friend of mine who is a member of Congress said that he went to a meeting at the White House and Joe Biden sat there with no cameras running or anything and pointed to essentially the building emphatically with his hand and said, "You have to understand something. Everyone has to understand something. This is labor's house." Okay. So I have to tell you, I am pretty excited about who we have in the White House. A guy who doesn't just speak the labor speak because it's cool to do that and say the word union because, you know, they know that they're supposed to be on the union side. No, we have someone who actually understands that labor creates all the value in this country, that we're going to rebuild our economy if we're pushing the relief package to the people who are on the front lines, that this is where we're actually going to make America strong. And so that is huge. And I have to say that getting this relief package in place, although it's likely not going to be perfect, is going to help a lot of average Americans, which make us stronger and show that this president can get some things done, give Democrats some credibility. They're going to need that because they have slim majorities, the slimmest in the Senate. And in order to get infrastructure done, they're going to have to get some credibility out there and get some help from governors and mayors, which he's doing. He's meeting with governors and mayors so that we can make this a bipartisan infrastructure package. I was talking with Peter DeFazio, who's going to lead this conversation as chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in the House. And there's a real plan there to get this done, but it's overwhelming. Now, all of that is going to make us stronger as labor too. Because if we have a relief plan and an infrastructure plan that actually also bakes in things like $15 minimum wage, that bakes in certain labor protections, that makes sure that, you know, a company can't discriminate just because someone doesn't have the papers to work here, right? That all workers have to be treated as workers. That this is going to make us stronger and give us the ability to fight for more. But I want to give a shout out to IUPAT, to the painters. I mean, they are leading the charge on the fight for the PRO Act, because the way that we're going to actually get the PRO Act done is to help the general public understand what it is and why it matters to them. This is critically important. And I'll tell you right now, Rick, the general public does not understand that. Okay, we have a hill to climb here.
No, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, most people.
Can you stick around real quick through our break? Because
Sure,
I didn't want to get to
yes.
this, and I didn't want you to stay this long, but I got to get to this. So let me take a break right here.
Okay.
Quick break, right back after this. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
We were talking about in the last segment the fact that we need major labor law reform in this country. And as I've said, look, you know, my problem with Democrats is, you know, every Democratic president in my lifetime has promised that we're going to get something. I go back to Carter when I was a young kid. There was talk of undoing Taft-Hartley. Bill Clinton promised a strike replacement bill. Barack Obama shook my hand twice and said, we're getting something better than the Employee Free Choice Act, and we got nothing. So when I look at this moment, and I'm thrilled that Joe Biden is our president, I am even more thrilled that on day one, he fired Peter Robb. And what I'm saying is one of the most symbolic things that he could have done by taking someone that was behind the Patco firings during the Reagan era and unceremoniously showing him the door in the most at-will way possible. This to me is very symbolic. Now we got to pass legislation to help people take that symbolic movement, that moment, and make it policy. And that's why I've still got Sara Nelson, the president of the American Flight Association, the American Flight Attendants Association, CWA, to come talk with us. Sara, I appreciate you taking time for us, and I'm sorry for screwing that up. I always think AFA-CWA, and Screw that up.
Well, you're not the only one, but I'm going to jump right in because I know we don't have a lot of time here, and you've got a lot of important stuff to get to. And by the way, I'm just going to say to all you union members out here, tell your unions to contribute to the Rick Smith Show and make sure that this can be good reporting for all workers out there. You know, there was actually a great story in the New Yorker today, but they got the name of the National Labor Relations Board wrong. All of a sudden, people are talking about labor and nobody knows how to talk about it. It's a big mystery to everybody. So, you know, the Rick Smith Show already has this baked in. This is labor's center here. So we got to support it. So going forward, we also have to support ourselves. And if we're going to organize in the millions, then we need the means to be able to do that. And we need the means to be able to lift up labor. So the PRO Act is critically important. But how do you get things done? You define the problem. You define the way that you're going to fix it. You add urgency, and then you say what you're willing to do to back that up. So first and foremost, the American public does not really understand the need for the PRO Act. So we can't just sit back and say, Joe Biden's going to do this for us. He's not. He's going to continue to talk about the importance of workers. He's going to continue to talk about the importance of unions and all of the value that we bring to this country. But we got to back that up now with action in our communities and make sure that these representatives understand that if they don't vote for the PRO Act, they are voting against their community, because these right to work laws that are in 27 states were put in place to keep white workers from black workers. They're racist, pure and simple. And it's through divide and conquer that union busters have been able to keep wages down. In right to work states, wages are lower. Safety is worse on the job because there's no one there to enforce it. You can have safety laws, but if you don't have someone backing up the workers when they come forward and report a safety violation, those workers are gone. And it's on them to try to take on the corporations by themselves. That's simply not going to happen. That's why right to work states, it's less safe at work. So we need unions in the workplace to actually have a strong democracy. So what does the PRO Act do? It does a few really important things. First of all, it gets rid of right to work across the board. Higher wages, more safe work environment, better democracy. Yay, win for all. So it stops employers from having anti-union meetings. Do you know how much money people spent? This is a several billion-dollar business, anti-union actions. It has them have to report out to their employees and to the public the money that they spend on consultants who are union busters. It allows for secondary strikes. So think about this. This is the very nature of what labor is and our power. We can stand up and we can strike in support of other workers. Now, we already do this in the airline industry. This is our right under the RLA, but this would make it a right across the nation so that we can stand up for other workers and make sure that corporations are not undercutting us by devaluing another job. It also says that independent contractors can be union members, which is another way that corporations try to do that. And it stops from permanently replacing strikers. So it strengthens that right to strike as well. It also says that the NLRB can conduct immediately injunctive relief for workers whose rights are being violated. And it says that if workers cannot get to a first contract, there is a mediation and arbitration process to make sure that those first contracts get in place. Many workers who form unions today, one of the reasons that their union efforts fail is because they'll go through all the hurdles to get to those elections, all of the retaliation and all of the pressure that employers put on them. And then they can't get to a first contract. And because they don't get to that first contract, they don't enjoy the real rights of being union members. So the PRO Act takes care of all of those things and will strengthen our ability to get unions faster, get improvements to people, and start to have leapfrog bargaining where we're actually raising the standards for all workers everywhere instead of a situation where we're all competing with each other in a race to the bottom.
No, I love that.
That's it.
I'm as thrilled as I can be. It's all great. It's all good. It's going to go back to the frame that I think is most important. Union jobs equal better lives. But real quick, what are the chances of this actually getting passed into law? Because as you said a moment ago, we've got a real slim majority. We're even in the Senate. You got Kamala Harris, who would cast the tie-breaking vote. There's not one Republican that's going to vote for this. How do you get this through?
there's not one Republican who's going to vote for this right now, and that's why it has no chance of passing. Okay, I'm saying it to you straight. But we don't do things just because we think that they are politically possible. We don't do things just because we think that someone else is going to get it most of the way there for us, and we can just show up for the celebration. I mean, organizing is hard. Doing this work is hard. You know what's harder, though? Watching our unions get picked apart. Watching people lose their job and get retaliated against. Watching people be discriminated against at work and losing everything. Watching people being humiliated at work. Watching people lose their lives or get hurt at work. Watching people lose their homes and go into personal bankruptcies. That's a hell of a lot harder. So if we want to get serious about this, we've got to get organized in our states and in our congressional districts and make the representatives understand that we know what this is and we're going to hold them accountable to voting for it. We can get Republican votes, but that's what it's going to take. And so we're going to have to get organized, and that takes helping our community understand this first.
I'm with you, and I appreciate your time and the thoughts. I hope you feel much better. You get beyond the COVID cough so you can get back out on the trail and fighting the good fight. Sara, as always, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rick. Take care. Good
Sara
night.
Nelson, our good friend, the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, AFA-CWA. We'll get links out on their union and